Hey, this morning we are studying the book of probably the greatest pickup lines of history. Yeah? Song of Songs, the Song of Solomon. You may know it as. If you have your Bible, go ahead and flip there now. But as Scott said, we are kicking off a new series called Love Song. And man, we are excited some of the truth that we'll discover this. But let me, as you're flipping there, and if you don't have a Bible, you can grab the one on the chair in front of you. You can also pull it up on the YouVersion Bible app and search Cross Church Phoenix under events, and all those notes will be there. But I just want to give you a little fair warning. That Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, it will make you blush, okay? We're studying a book that it can be a little graphic. And I'm talking sexually graphic. And as kids are like, hey, get out of the room today. Today is pretty mild. It will get a little crazy later. But as we read this book, we're going to see some incredible truth that God has for us. But this is not for the faint of heart. And as we begin this series, we just had Valentine's Day on Friday. But Valentine's is just the launching pad of 8 weeks of love as we are going to study this, as we're going to dive into this text, and we're going to kind of see what God has for us. So with all that said, let's start in Song of Songs, chapter 1, starting in verse 1. It says this: the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. I'm pretty sure I just said the title like 10 times, and it just summed it up there. But before we get into kind of some of the content we're going to be talking about, I want to start and give you a little overview of this book. And I want to give you a little bit of background. And the first is we have to start of who wrote this. Now we see this guy's name named Solomon. Now there's two schools of thoughts that as we study this text is one say that this was a love song. This was a book that was written to Solomon. And this was kind of written to him, and it was his ultimate love song that was dedicated to him. It kind of makes me think of, does anyone listen to the radio anymore? Does anyone know what the radio is? Is that even a thing? I still listen to sports talk, but that's about it. And then I go, except when my teams are terrible, which is often in Arizona. So I get angry and then don't want to listen to it. But in old radio stations, or when you went to a school dance, you would see that cute girl, or you would say and be like, hey, DJ, I want to dedicate this next song to this girl. And the DJ would come over and be like, and this next one of You Will Be My Love Forever, or Until Next Week, is dedicated to, and then it would be that special someone. And I kind of feel like that could be one school of thought we talk about here, is this was dedicated to Solomon, but the other belief is that Solomon is the author. And this is actually the view that I hold to, and I think that as we see it, it makes the most sense. But now, let's get a little bit background on who Solomon is. You see, Solomon was a king of Israel thousands of years ago. And he was actually the son of what is regarded as the greatest king of Israel of all time, this guy named David, the little shepherd boy who took a sling, hit it in the head with a giant, then chopped that giant's head off. It got really bloody and gory. It was awesome. But David was looked at as this ultimate king. But God actually told David that you have too much blood on your hands to do some of the things I want to do, which is a really sweet way to be described, right? It's like 300 meets Braveheart, and that's David. But he's like, you have too much blood, so I'm going to do some things through your son. And Solomon got to do some amazing things as king. He was regarded as the wisest man of all time in that period. And I would say probably the wisest man throughout history outside of Jesus Christ was this guy Solomon. He, being that wisdom and having this special kind of set apart from God, was also able to build God's temple. And if you go read through 1 and 2 Kings, there's some amazing passages that we can see what Solomon did. But he also had his missteps, like marrying a lot of women, which we'll get to in a second. But 1 Kings tells us that Solomon, not only being the wisest king, but he wrote over 3,000 proverbs and 1,005 songs. This guy had an extensive library. And actually, some of that we get to see in our Bible. There are 3 books that are credited to Solomon. We have Songs of Songs, which is a book of passion. We have Proverbs, that is a book of practicality. We have Ecclesiastes, which we studied a couple years ago, is that a book of philosophy. And he wrote these at some various stage in his life. I actually think he probably wrote Song of Songs in his youth, Proverbs kind of in his prime as a 40 or 50-year-old man, which is your prime of leadership. I think I'm encouraging some people there. And he wrote late in his life, he probably wrote Ecclesiastes. But as we approach Song of Songs, and we see this in Solomon's collection, This is his ultimate work. This is the best thing he ever wrote as coming from a song. You know, when I was growing up, I used to listen to like punk rock, and then I got into hardcore music and a little emo screamo kid. And most of that, you're like, what does that even mean? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about right now. And I had this one album that I loved so much. I used to wake up and had my iPod shuffle, and I would, on my way to school, I would take the bus, and I would rock this album every single day. It was the best thing that band ever produced, and I loved it so much, and it was their masterpiece. And when we come to Song of Solomon, this is his Grammy masterpiece, what he was known for, what his song that stood above the rest. That is why we call it the song of all songs. And as we get into this passage and we get into this series, we're going to see what this ultimate love song looks like. But you see, as we begin this study, we do need to address a problem of this book. Because maybe if you know who Solomon is, he kind of also had a little rock star quality to him. That he wrote a love song, and we're going to talk about what marriage looks like, how you should date, and how God loves us. And this was written by a guy who was said to have 700 wives and 300 concubines. That's rough. And a concubine was just a fancy way of saying a mistress who, got to live there, got to do what a mistress does, but didn't get the benefits of having the family name. So this guy was a little out there, a little crazy. He made Hugh Hefner look like a nice family man, okay? 700 wives, 300 concubines, 1,000 women living in his house. I have no idea how he did it. I would just say, I have one wife and one daughter, and I think that's enough women I can handle. But he had 1,000 women that this guy was engaged with. So why in the world would we take his advice on a love book? Why in the world would we listen to this guy who, let's be honest, wasn't quite the most faithful? Well, I would say there are two thoughts to this one. One is if that he did write this as a young man, like we stated before, then this would have been to his true love. This would have been his first wife, before his promiscuity, before when there was purity, when there was passion in his marriage, and before he defiled it in many ways. This is where he started. Second, some believe this was written late in his life as an indictment and a repentance on his life of promiscuity, and gives the ideal for what a relationship and what a marriage should be. So you see, either of these could line up with the message of what a marriage between a husband and a wife should look like. But I think there's a deeper meaning that I believe also leads to the path of this book. You see, there are two major ways we can interpret this book. One is to interpret it literally, meaning this is a man and a woman talking back and forth in this song, in this format, and it's them expressing their love towards one another. Literally, you just say this is between a man and a woman, and this is what they're saying back and forth. That's one interpretation, but there's also what we call allegory. An allegory means there's some symbolism here. And you see, the Song of Songs is also full of symbolism about the love and marriage between Jesus and his church. And as we read this book, we're going to follow both these lines of interpretation, because I believe that if we just interpret it on one side, we are missing so much of what God has for us. But here's what I want to say, is that marriage is a gift from God. And we're going to talk a lot about that as in this series goes on. And there are some great gifts that God gives exclusively for marriage, like sex. And we're going to talk about sex throughout this series and how it's supposed to be holy and hot. And those are going to be really fun ones that you want to bring your spouse to. But we also need to understand that marriage is not the ultimate gift. And that as we study this passage, that is saying what the ideal should be of God's marriage and how he designed it in the institution he made, but it is also pointing to something so much greater, which is Jesus Christ redeeming his church and God's relationship with Christians and God's relationship with his church. Douglas O'Donnell sums it up this way, that this song is a song that Adam could have sung in the garden when Eve arose miraculously from his side. And he says this, it remains a song that we can and should sing in the bedroom, in the church, in the marketplace of ideas. I don't know what marketplace of ideas means. I think it just means the world. He sounded cool, though. He's really smart. But as we study this book, we will view it through the lens of interpretation. But we also note that this book is very messy. And we read a lot of book studies here. We did Acts last year. We did Joshua as well. And those are easy to go linear throughout a book and say, this is what happened, and this is what happened, this what happened. But the Song of Songs is exactly that. It is a song. And sometimes songs are a little messy. Sometimes songs have repeating choruses. Sometimes songs don't make any sense and just like a random word to make it rhyme, which isn't quite the case here. But they're kind of all over the place. And as we read this book, we're going to pick up on some topics, but we're also going to be jumping around a little bit to see kind of the heart behind this passion. So with all that said, let's dive into our topic this morning, attraction. Now, if you are not married and you want to be, my question for you as we think through this are, what are the qualities you want to build within yourself to attract the right kind of person? And what are the qualities maybe that you want to be attracted to in another person that could potentially be your spouse? If you are married, we're obviously going to build these qualities in an ongoing manner, because if you've been married and you know that it just doesn't stop. You don't attract your spouse once and you're like, I'm good, we got married, I hit the jackpot and I'm done. I'm going to go sit on my laurels. But it's an ongoing process of continuing wooing, continuing attraction, continuing drawing in your spouse. And this morning we're talking about the qualities that will build into our life. Now, in 2020, we get an interesting little wrinkle with this, because there's a thing now called online dating. Yeah? You guys are all so excited that I'm going to talk about this. But online dating is a fun thing, and it could be really easy to make fun of online dating. But what's actually cool about this, and it's funny, last week I just talked to a couple, someone who's a great part of our church, one of them being a member, and then he introduced me to someone, and we're like, we met online. And I've met so many people where great marriages have been started online and have been birthed out of this. But we also need to realize, and this is just heightened in online, but sometimes in the dating scene, and especially in the online dating scene, not everything is as it seems. You can say amen there. Not everything maybe looks like it appears on the surface. Sometimes how people represent themselves may not be totally accurate. My wife and I recently watched a show on Netflix, which was really stupid and terrible, so I wouldn't in any way recommend it. But like, when you start a show on Netflix, are you really allowed to stop it? Like, I feel like you just got to power through, and like 10 seasons, all right, let's knock this out. It was actually like one season, but it felt like 10. It was horrible. But it was a social media game, or competition. It was like Survivor for social media, and they never got to meet people. They just created profile pictures and then uploaded pictures and then chatted on their thing, and they never got to see someone face to face. So they had a guy who was like pretending to be a girl and catfishing people, and all these people like put up this representation of who they were, but it really wasn't the case. So I just want to, this morning, before we get into this and we talk about attraction, I want to pull the curtain back. I want to demystify some of what an online and kind of decipher what it means. If any of these offend you, I totally stole this from somewhere else, so I'll give you the name of that guy, and you can be mad at him. But let's start here. If a woman says in an online ad that she is 40-ish, what this means is she is 49 and a half, okay? We just got to put it out there. We got to understand what this language means when it's put online. If a guy says he's 40-ish, it means he's 52 and he's looking for a 25-year-old. So run as fast as you can the other way. If a guy says he's huggable, that means he's probably carrying a few extra pounds and may have more body hair than Bigfoot. Just throwing it out there. It's like a nice giant teddy bear. Okay? If a woman says she's romantic, it means she just looks better by candlelight. If that offended you, I'm sorry. If it didn't, there's still time. If a guy says, I'm laid back and I'm very close to my family, it means he lives with his family. And he does not have a job. And he's hoping you have a really good job and he can get out of his mom's house. Just saying. If a woman says, I'm bubbly and fun, that means she never shuts up. Ever. She just talks a lot. If a woman says she's an independent woman, that means she has control issues and she's in charge and it's not a discussion. And lastly, if a guy says, I'm average looking, ladies, that means he fell from the ugly tree and hit every branch on the way down. You just need to know these things. I'm just trying to take the veil back a little bit. So anyway, I think it's funny though how in 2020, whether it's online or even in person, there are so many ways where we try to represent ourselves to the outside world. And sometimes we try to fool people, and this is so easy to do in dating or attracting ourselves to others in a relationship or even in a friendship. But what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about 4 different qualities from Song of Songs chapter 1 of 4 qualities that we can build in to attract the way that God tells us to. So with that said, let's see the first quality is we should attract with godly character. Check out chapter 1, starting in verse 2. It says this, and this is the woman talking to Solomon. She says, "Oh, that he would kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your caresses are more delightful than wine. The fragrance of your perfume is intoxicating. Your name is perfume poured out. No wonder young women adore you." Now, I'm telling you, this is the light stuff. We're going to get a lot crazier than that. But I think a lot of how Song of Songs goes is when we just read this on the surface, we're like, what in the world does that mean? And I think we need to contextualize some of this. We need to dig back behind some of these layers. For example, here, when it's talking about this perfume. Now, we have perfume now, and you can spray stuff. Hopefully you wear deodorant so you don't smell bad. But 3,000 plus years ago, they didn't quite have like deodorant, that antiperspirant, and they also didn't have this thing that wasn't real common, was showers or baths. And there was dirt roads, so people stunk a lot. Like it probably smelled like a boys' locker room, like in most of the places in the world at that time. So if you were wealthy, if you had money, not only would you be the select few that gets to take a bath, but you'd also have these rich fragrances and these perfume. And what she's saying here when she talks about this perfume, this expensive oil, she says it's intoxicating. Your name is perfume poured out. She's saying, man, what I know about you, what I know about your character is, man, it is like rich, refined oil. That there is a presence about you that stands out. And she's saying here, it's like a rare, expensive, purified oil. In other words, you have godly character. Now, when we come to this and we think about what does godly character mean, well, I think we need to point out that reputation and character are 2 very different things. You see, reputation is who others think you are, whereas character is who you really are. And the first thing that is mentioned here as we start this book is his character. And he says this guy has godly character. And when we talk about attraction, this should be the first thing that makes us attracted to someone else. This is where we should start. And sadly, our world is so backwards when it comes to this. Now, here's something I think we hear in the church a lot, though. Well, I want a good Christian guy. I want a good Christian girl. But I only attract the wrong type. The only ones that are attracted to me are the wrong type of guy, the wrong type of girl, the ones who don't have jobs, or the ones that only have one thing on their mind. And where I would respectively, and may make you mad a little bit here, where I would say is we got to look at the way we're fishing. You see, there's 2 ways, there's 2 important things when it comes to fishing. Is where you fish. If you're fishing in a pond of all catfish, what are you going to catch? You're going to catch a catfish. All of a sudden, you're not going to have some beautiful trout that pops out of there. Now, is a catfish better than a trout? I have no idea. I don't fish, so this is where it breaks down for me. But where you fish is important, but also with what bait you're fishing with. So often, in growing up, I had the same experiences, or I hear this inside the church all the time, is I can't find the right person. These guys or these girls that I'm attracting just are not right for me. And we got to ask, well, where are we looking? Because a man of godly character is probably not at the bar twerking on the dance floor on Friday night. It's the truth. And so often we're like, we have these guys, they're just deadbeats. They're just, well, where did you find them? Are you looking in the right place? Are you fishing in the right place? Pastor Anley Stanley says it this way. He says, become the person that you're looking for is looking for. Let me say that one more time. I love that. Become the person that you're looking for is looking for. Are we fishing in the right place? But also, are we building in ourselves to be the right person? Are we searching for someone with godly character, but building godly character into us? You see, if you seek Jesus first, and let me give a time out here, is what attracted you, if you are a follower of Jesus, if you consider yourself that, you consider yourself a Christian, what attracted you to Jesus in the first place? Was it because he was a bad boy rule breaker? Was it because he was on this outskirts and he ruffled all these feathers and he did all these bad things? No. What attracts us to Jesus is he was a perfect man in God here on earth, but that he followed all the rules, but did it with love and grace. And that when people came to him who were broken and hurting, he picked up their chin and he loved them. And he showed them a type of love that was so stand out from anything different in our world. But here's what I'm saying. If we seek Jesus first, then it will change everything about us. Then it will attract and help us be attracted to someone who also has that godly character. Second, we see that there will be growing trust. Check out verse 5. It says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, I am dark like the tents of Kedar, yet lovely like the curtains of Solomon. Do not stare at me because I am dark, for the sun has gazed on me. My mother's sons were angry with me. They made me take care of the vineyards. I have not taken care of my own vineyard." Now, when we first read this passage, I think our first impression today might be, well, is there some sort of like racial kind of tension here? But actually, she's not even talking about her skin being dark because she's from a different race than Solomon. That's not what she's referring to here. But there was this thought in that day and age that it was more attractive, it was more beautiful if you came from a family of wealth and you didn't have to quite do some of the hard work yourself. So if you were from a family of wealth, you got to stay inside. And you got to be inside and you didn't have to work your butt off. But what she's saying is the sun has made me dark. If I go outside, the sun doesn't really make me dark. It just burns my skin because I'm like a ghost out there. It like burns. I go red and then back to white really quickly. But she's like, I am dark because I've had to work my butt off. And she's saying, my family didn't set me up for success. I had to take care of the vineyards, meaning the family vineyards, meaning I had to neglect my own. And when she says my vineyard, she's talking about her body. That I had to neglect my body. I had to work outside. I had to make ends meet. I had to work my butt off. And I don't maybe look as beautiful and attractive in my eyes. She's revealing her insecurities. I don't look like those girls do on TV. You know, one of the things I love about our church is that we say all the time that anyone from anywhere is welcome here. And we live in a community that is very broken. Community that is sometimes it is just hard. And we live in a world that reflects that. And one of the things is we have a ton of single moms in our congregation. And I love it because I get to see the strengths of these moms. And so often we can get the insecurity that our world tells us is you've screwed up, you've made mistakes, you're this, you're that. And she's feeling these insecurities here, but this strength and the encouragement that he gets to give here is saying, and he's going to encourage her a little later, we're going to see that. But I just want to say, don't let those insecurities get in your head. That I love some of our single moms that are doing it the hard way, that are working their butt off to provide for their children, to give them better opportunity than maybe they had. And we see the same thing here as a woman who is working her tail off, is working her butt off. And because she sees this man with godly character, she starts revealing these insecurities inside her. She says, this is how I feel about myself. She's opening up. There is growing trust in this relationship. There is a place to share. But then this trust also is accompanied by higher standards. Check out verse 7. She says this, tell me you whom I love, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you let them rest at noon? Why should I be like the one who veils herself beside the flocks of your companions? We again have to ask, what does this mean? Well, if I can say it very bluntly, when she speaks of a veiled woman at this time was known as someone who would give themselves to men for a price. She's saying, I'm not like that. She just says flat out, I'm not a prostitute. She's like, I don't know if you got the wrong impression here, but this is who I am. She's like, I just want to set this up. This is the standard. She has these higher standards and says, I'm not going to do some things that maybe the world or others say to get a man's attention. That's not going to cut it here. Now, here's where I get to say something that probably seems a little archaic in 2020. Is this very much goes to a dating relationship. But in dating and in the church, and this is hard, you have two choices. You can choose to honor God together, or you can choose to sin together when it comes to sexual conversations. And our world says this is no big deal. That if you don't have sex before marriage, something's wrong with you. You need to try it before you buy it. You need to see if you're compatible. I'm telling you, men and women are sexually compatible. It works. God created it that way. There's no checking that needs, trust me. But we say we need to try this out. We need to see if this works. And this is the lie our world tells us. And when we go in dating, and maybe you've made mistakes in the past, and that's okay. And honestly, this doesn't change in marriage because those standards still need to be there in marriage. This is still applicable. But maybe you've made problems in the past and you're going forward in dating. You can say, we're going to honor God together, or we're going to choose to sin together. And here's why this is so important. Because then once we go into that marriage, you decide what kind of foundation you're building on. Because if you choose to sin together, then in the back of your mind, the woman's thinking, well, he compromised when we dated. Will he compromise again? And he's thinking, well, she compromised when we dated. Will she compromise again? In this shifty foundation we build our lives on now, if you've made that, there's still grace in there. And it might take some time to work through some of those issues, but I'm just telling you from the start that we decide how the foundation we're going to build our marriage upon. Are we going to build it upon the standards that God sets, or by the standards the world sets, which are really, really far apart? And then one day, maybe a marriage comes out of that. And I guarantee you, if you choose to live this life and choose to sin together, that honeymoon is just going to be checking a box. It's going to be another day at the office. Or it could be something beautiful. It can be something great that we build as a foundation that we continue to build on for our marriage for years to come. You see, she's saying here that I'm not like the rest of the world. And I don't care what the world says. I don't care what those veiled women say. And as a church, we got to start here. We got to start saying, I don't care that the world says I'm a prude. I don't care that the world says you're a weirdo and you don't practice this. Are we going to be on the standards of the Bible and of our God, or the standards that are always shifting and getting lower and lower and lower of our worlds? Lastly, we have consistent encouragement. Check out verse 9. This is a great line I tried to open up with. It says, I compare you, my darling, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. Now, I'm sure this doesn't need any explanation, because I'm sure, guys, you tell your spouse or your girlfriend that they look like a horse all the time, right? Just try that out. Baby, you're like a horse. And then, no, just walk away. I'm sure she'll feel so flattered. It's like, you call me what? We're going to fight right now. Let me give you a little background on this. This horse that she talks about here, or that he talks about, this is him responding to her. This would have been a white horse that pulled Pharaoh's chariot. And why is this such a big deal? Because you see, this horse, some believed was actually godlike, like it was a heavenly creature. And this horse was seen as more prized than a lot of people. It was a little crazy there. But when he's saying, you look like a horse, he's saying, baby, you're beautiful. You're a prized possession. Man, you are above all of it. You are like the apple of my eye. It looks like you came right down from heaven and God laid you in front of me. That's a good pickup line. That's a little better than the horse one. But that's what he's telling her. He's telling her, I know you shared these insecurities with me, but I love everything about you. You say you have dark skin and you're ashamed that you've had to work for it. Well, I see you as a beautiful white horse that has just lifted down from heaven. You see, they opened up. I love how this starts, is they first sought each other's character. And then when that happened, then they began to share one another's insecurities and trusted one another more and more. They said, we have these standards and we're not gonna move on these standards. This is where it's at and it's gonna stay there. And then this led to them encouraging each other and how beautiful they were. Our world has this so backwards. We first start with, are they physically good looking? No? All right, move on. Or yeah, they're good looking. Now let's find out if they're a terrible person. Okay, they're a terrible person, but are they terrible enough that I can tolerate it? And that's how our world thinks. Instead of first starting with who are they as a person and working through to, man, you are so beautiful. Because not only do I see how you look physically, but I see what's on the inside. Here's what happens when we do this the right way. Here's the result that we get from this. First, we see that she feels special. Check out verse 1 of chapter 2. She says, I am a wildflower of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. And he responds and says, like a lily among thorns, so is my darling among the young women. Notice this, in chapter 1, she feels insecure, but in chapter 2, after she's opened up to him, after he's encouraged her, she feels special. She says, I feel like a lily. Her mindset has totally flipped because of the relationship that has begun to sprout here. Because he loved her through the insecurities, because he adored her, because he cherished her, he valued her, it led her to feeling special. But not only did she feel special, she feels secure. Check out verse 3. It says, like an apricot tree among the trees of the forest, so is my love among the young men. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. We don't have time for that this week. We'll get to it later. Verse 4, he brought me to the banquet hall, and he looked on me with love. She says she feels safe and secure in his presence. Pastor Greg Gushel says it this way, that a godly husband is to do 3 things for his wife. And the 3 things he talks about is what the 3 things he is to be for his wife is to be her pastor, her provider, and her protector. What does that mean? Well, first, what does it mean to be his pastor? Well, as a pastor, the wife is to be the one that spiritually sets the tone for the family. I'm so thankful that I grew up, and my dad did exactly this. We went to church on Sunday morning and Wednesday and whatever, and it wasn't a choice. He's like, get in the car, we're going to church, or I'm going to drag you and throw you in. They were yelling the whole way, and then you pull in the parking lot and you put on your church face. Never? Just kidding. But we went to church, but then we didn't just stop there. I got to watch my dad be in community with other people. I got to watch my dad serve, to be a leader. My dad never has been or never will be a pastor of a church. But he was the pastor of our family. And he set the tone for my mom, and he set the tone for the rest of our family, this is what we're going to be about. And when we make our brides feel special and secure, it starts there. But the husband is also to be the provider. You're like, oh, where are you going here? Now, this doesn't mean that a wife shouldn't work, and this doesn't mean that a wife can't make more money than a husband. There's nothing in the Bible that says anything contrary to that. But the husband also sets the tone. So it's ask the questions. Do we tithe? Do we give in church? Do we have enough money to pay the bills and make sure we are financially responsible? My wife and I started another show on Netflix. We really don't just watch TV all day, I promise. When you have a 3 and a 2-year-old and they're in bed by 7 o'clock, there's not much else to do besides watch TV. You can't go anywhere or have fun, but it's nice when it's all quiet. So we watched this show, and in it, the husband makes some stupid financial decisions to the point where a wife has to rob a grocery store in order to make their ends meet. And it goes from there. Also not good, but 3 seasons. We're halfway through season 1. I think we have to finish it, so we'll see how that goes. But as a provider, the husband needs to help set the tone for this. The man needs to be involved in some way. And lastly, to be a protector. Not just physically, but also emotionally and spiritually protect our wives from the danger around. And look at how she responds. When she feels special, when she feels secure, check out verse 5 of chapter 2. This is what she says to him. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apricots, for I am lovesick. May his left hand be under my head, and his right arm embrace me. Now, I wish we had more time to dive into this, and we will over the coming weeks. But just real quick, raisins here were an aphrodisiac. And apricots or apples were an energy boost. So what she's saying here is, I want you, okay? But why does she want him physically so much? Why is she seeking him? Why is she loving him? Because she knows that she's been attracted in the right way. She knows who this guy is, and the relationship is built on a healthy foundation. She says, I know he loves me and cares for me spiritually, physically, emotionally, and that he would give himself sacrificially for her. So then she wants to then engage in a physical relationship. Here's how I want to wrap this up today, and here's kind of the little application points I want to stick in your head. If you're married today, I want to challenge you, and man, I'm challenging myself in this as well, to attract your spouse the right way. Are we attracting our spouse with godly character, with trust, with having a standard that doesn't dip when we get married? And then are we encouraging one another so that we feel special, we feel secure? This doesn't stop in dating. This is really just the start in dating, and it gets a lot harder once we get married. Are we doing it the right way? If you aren't married, maybe you're looking, maybe you want to have that relationship one day, I want to remind you and challenge you to become the person that you're looking for is looking for. It's not just going to happen. And sometimes it's not on our timeline. And you're like, I don't know how to find that right guy, that right girl. But what we can do is work on ourselves and make sure we are who we should be in Jesus Christ. And lastly, I want to challenge all of us in the room is to remember and reflect on the fact that this is exactly how Jesus Christ has attracted us. Jesus has godly character. Man, he came here as man, as fully man and fully God, and lived a perfect life. He never compromised. He had people who tried to get him to take shortcuts, but he said, no, I'm not going to do it that way. And over again, we saw the character on display throughout the Gospels of who this guy is, who Jesus Christ is. He was a man of impeccable character that we can never, ever touch. But because it started there, then he learned and people around him learned that this was a guy we could confide in, that we could trust, that we could come to with our insecurities. And if you are a follower of Jesus Christ, maybe that's where you felt before, that I have some jacked up things in my life, but Jesus will never be like, man, that's too much for me. He says, no, come, bring it. I know what you've been through. I know the mistakes you've made. I know the dumb things you've done. I don't care. Just come to me and we'll talk through it, and I'll love you through it. But not only do we can trust him, we have a God who has a standard and doesn't compromise on that. I love what the woman caught in adultery. Jesus picked up her chin. He said, I don't condemn you. I love you. But then he said, go and sin no more. Live a life that is greater than what our world has for us. But that God didn't stop there. He also continuously encourages us. And Jesus Christ is always right there by our side. That when we sin and we mess up and we feel like we took 2 steps back, he's right next to us and say, it's okay. We can keep going forward. And when we believe in that God, when we are attracted to that kind of Jesus Christ, you will feel special and you will feel secure in a way that no earthly relationship will ever compare. Let's pray.